everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of Journey Forward with Jory Rose. This whole month, we're talking about why it's so important to slow down and why it matters. And when we don't slow down, what are we missing? And I find that with clients and myself over the course of the past 15 years since I've been really delving into this question, I've realized just how hard the simple things of slowing down and being present is. Why is that? But last week, we talked about the power of slowing down, understanding a little bit of meditation. I told my hilarious story of literally thinking I was going to die when I had to sit in stillness and just breathe for 10 minutes. I had no idea why that matters. But I'm going to take it to a different angle this week. So let me ask you a question. So if this whole month is all about having to be, slow down, you move too fast, one of the angles that I invite you to consider, here's the question for this week. What makes you happy? What does happiness mean to you? I really, really invite you to sit on that question. And in fact, our meditation for this week, if you are part of the Journey Forward community, which if you don't know what that is, check out the link in the show notes that will tell you all about it. But in a nutshell, it's a way of taking the tools from this podcast and integrating it, getting guidance and meditations and handouts and community and a monthly live training to integrate. So the meditation for this week is going to be all about sitting with the question of what makes me happy, really sitting with that question. But in absence of dwelling on it, just off the cuff, I invite you to hit pause for a second and just ask yourself, what really makes me happy? And I'm really curious what your answers are going to be. Perhaps happiness means to you being on vacation. Perhaps happiness is getting along with your partner or your kids behaving well. Perhaps happiness is being the weight that you really want to get to and being able to stick to. Perhaps happiness is laughter with a good friend. Perhaps happiness is a good meal. Perhaps happiness is a really good day in the stock market. Perhaps happiness is buying a perfect new pair of jeans or a really great pair of shoes. Maybe happiness is getting into bed the first time after you've put on clean sheets and it's all nice and fresh and crisp and tight. Perhaps happiness is a really good hair day. Perhaps happiness is a beautiful, warm spring day, the smell of flowers, blue skies, light breeze. Or maybe happiness is sitting curled up by the fire with a cup of coffee. Maybe happiness is a really great conversation with a friend. So I'm going through a whole range, just off the cuff, of all the things that I hear people talk about and what make them happy. But here is the real challenge for you I invite you to consider. What if you are stuck in patterns where none of those things you're able to have right now? Maybe you're feeling disconnected from the people around you. Maybe you don't have an ability to go on vacation or go out for dinner or buy new clothes. Maybe you're living in a place where the weather just brings you down. Maybe right now you're not connected to your friends in a way where the relationships are feeling fulfilling for you. So why am I bringing all this up? It's so easy to have a definition of happiness to be to some external thing that we can buy or achieve. And while those things can create happiness, what I'm here to suggest for you today is happiness is an inside job. Happiness is finding truly the gratitude that you're alive, that you're breathing, that you are aligned and authentic and connected to yourself. Because if all those other things that you have, the great pair of jeans, the new shoes, the beautiful vacation, the wonderful meal, the spa treatment, the perfect weather, a great afternoon with a friend, you know what the challenge is with all those things? They're all impermanent. What happens if you have that great night out with a girlfriend and you come home and you're feeling really disconnected from the people in your house? Or one day the stock market's up and the next day it's dropped and now you're really unhappy. So I think you can see that what I'm pointing out is when we define our happiness by an achievement or experience of something outside of our own selves, it's fleeting. So that's not to say it can't bring you joy, but the fundamental practice of happiness is how you relate to your own self, how present you are, and your ability to feel connected, mind, body, and spirit. Because if you're disconnected from yourself, then you're likely looking for more external factors to bring you the joy that you're not feeling inside. So I'm going to suggest that when you have worked on that happiness as being an inside job, alignment, presence, connection, authenticity, awareness, it's going to make all of those external things that much sweeter because you won't need the external things to be the source of your happiness. So I am not at all saying all those things can't bring you a good moment, good joy, or even make you feel happy. But what I'm really curious about and what I want to delve in deeper to today is when none of those things are happening, what can I do internally in which I can be the barometer of my own inner peace? Because if I'm full of chaos inside my brain and my body, am I really going to be able to notice those moments of happiness? Am I really going to be able to notice the moments that bring me joy? Or will I not even pay attention to it? Will I be able to harness it? Will I be able to deepen my connection to it? So I'm talking a little esoterically right now, but what I really wanted to jump in with, starting off today's episode, is challenge you with how you define happiness. Now, we know from positive psychology that we can turn up the volume on positive emotions, and that is a practice. And it begins by an awareness of what are we even feeling right now to know if I need to turn up the volume on those positive emotions. And then there's a question of how do I go about doing that? Easier said than done. But what I want to suggest to you today that if you are moving through your life on autopilot, distracted from your own self, disconnected from your body, your intuition, your emotions, your sensations, if you're over attaching to external factors like, I'll be happy when my partner is a better listener, or I'll be happy when my kids listen to what I say, or do the thing you've been asking them to do, or I'll be happy when my boss or my coworker treats me with greater respect. As long as we have some external factor deciding our happiness, we might be waiting around a really, really, really long time. So many years ago, I woke up in my early 30s and I asked myself, how did I get here? I had everything I ever wanted. I was married. I had 2 daughters. I always wanted 2 daughters. Had a house, the very first house we ever saw. That was the house we always wanted. I lived in. And I thought I achieved everything I ever wanted. And while I was happy on the surface, inside, I really wasn't happy. These external achievements or getting to all these things that I thought checked the box of what was next and what was next did not give me the internal experience of inner peace, of inner happiness, of inner contentment. And that was nobody's fault. And that was nobody else's job but my own. And the way that I learned that was through slowing down and beginning my meditation and mindfulness practice. And if you listen to last week's episode, I told you about that very first meditation practice in which I literally thought I was going to die for slowing down and breathing for 10 minutes. But that gave me the experience in showing me just how simply disconnected from my own self I was. And the great vacations and the great things I got to do didn't have the same sense of fulfillment because I wasn't fulfilled internally. I see this as a huge challenge for women and many of the clients that I work with who may or may not have the external factors they're looking for, the ones that they've attached to believing will bring them joy and happiness. And it isn't until we learn to discover their connection to their inner world, their thoughts, their emotions, their sensations, their body, how to actually be in this present moment. This is a big deal, especially when we live in a culture that glorifies busyness. We live in a culture that is not supportive of slowing down. And in fact, it's easy to believe that if we slow down, we're being lazy, we're being unproductive. We're always trying to achieve more, to have more, to be more. But if that were the case in this capitalistic society in which achieving and having and being more, wouldn't you think that that would lead to an epidemic of happiness in our culture and society? But it doesn't. So the big lie, the big disconnect is having and achieving and getting more does not mean we're actually happy. We're actually fulfilled, that we're actually content. It's an inside job. And today we're going to talk about why it matters and how to get there. And the story I'm going to start off by telling you is actually about the Buddha. Siddhartha, as he was named, was born a prince. And in fact, when I tell this story, I like to think of it like the movie Aladdin, which it was really quite similar to the Princess Jasmine. So as in most Disney movies, she had no mother, just like Siddhartha had no mother. Okay, so there's some overlap here. Disney did not always start with some fresh ideas. And if you think back to the movie Aladdin, what did Jasmine's father, the king, what did he do? He wanted to keep her inside the palace because inside the palace, there was, in his mind, she could have everything she ever wanted. It was abundant. Clearly, that was all she needed. But she'd had all that she ever wanted, and it wasn't enough. So what did Jasmine do? And I'll get back to the Buddha in a second, but the stories really overlap. What did Jasmine do? She jumped over the palace walls and went into the village and saw a whole lot more life experience than she ever knew existed. She ended up meeting Aladdin. He lied. They ended up getting married, but they found love. Okay, so back to the Buddha. It's a similar story. He was born a prince, lived in a palatial kingdom. He had no mother. His father kept inside the palace walls to protect him from what was on the other side. Thought that it would make him happy. But he wasn't happy. He wasn't content. So just like Jasmine, he jumped over the palace walls and saw things he didn't even know existed. Disease, poverty, death. And realized that that is the human condition, not living inside a palace. And he went on a search to understand how to have that happiness, how to be content, and went through various ways in trying to uncover that, but ultimately sat himself under the Bodhi tree and said, I'm not getting up until I got this all figured out. And I'm giving the abridged version of the story here, of course. But as he sat under the Bodhi tree, he was tempted by beauty and sex and beautiful women trying to tempt him away from finding himself. And temptations can be a big distraction. We see it all the time. And yet, when we give in to those temptations and those distractions, the happiness we might feel might be momentary, but it may not be lasting. And he was in search of the lasting happiness. And what the Buddha discovered as he sat under the Bodhi tree, that the key to being happy was to be in the present moment. Because when we are ruminating into the past, wishing the way things were, to be able to go back to something takes us out of the here and now. When we anticipate the future and we go into a what if, anxiety, the unknown, uncertainty, that makes us pretty anxious. Even if right now in this moment, none of those things are happening. It can instantly change our mood, give us a pit in our stomach. And we instantly, even if we're having a great moment, a mere thought of the future unknown can cause unhappiness. So here lies the wisdom, which is so hard, so easy to understand, so hard to implement and to maintain, is that not only is happiness an inside job, again, whatever we may achieve externally might give us that momentary joy, but if we are disconnected inside, if we are not present, if we are stuck in rumination or anticipation, even if we have that beautiful thing in this moment and we're not present with it, we're not going to be able to take that in. Easier said than done. That's why it's a practice. One of the things that I always say. And what he also discovered is what's called the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths is, the first one is that suffering exists. He saw that outside the palace walls, just like Jasmine did. What he realized is that there is a cause to our suffering, usually based in some desire to have something we don't have in this moment. Well, he realized if there's a cause to our suffering, there must be a way to end the suffering. And the fourth noble truth is that the way to end our suffering is what he called the Eightfold Path. And these were ways to live through ethics and meditation and wisdom, how to have right action without harming others, how to have right speech, which is how we speak truth, how to earn a living without causing harm. Under the meditation category is mindfulness. This is the source of where mindfulness practice comes from. It's one of the ways that the Buddha discovered to decrease our suffering was through the practice of mindfulness, which ultimately is about awareness. Awareness of yourself, awareness for others, with empathy, with compassion, to be able to have right effort to put into meditation and to understanding how to create those positive emotions, to developing focus and concentration and attention so we can stay present with the good that's here in the moment. And through wisdom, through understanding that there's a right way of viewing the world, that actions have consequences, and to live with intention and compassion. And so when we understand that there is a path that has been set before us thousands and thousands of years ago, that the root of a mindfulness practice is rooted in Buddhist meditation, which was all about how to decrease our suffering. Because again, it doesn't matter what you have or how much of it. If you are stuck in patterns that don't allow you to find the inner peace, the inner ability to respond and not react to whatever's arising, then that happiness is really fleeting. So really considering this idea of happiness. Now, I think one of the great emotions that's underrated is contentment. And I can honestly say I'm at a point in my life where contentment is one of my most often gratifying experiences. It's something I tune into gratitude most frequently. Contentment to me is I have all that I need. I am not striving for anything else right now in this moment. Contentment is being fulfilled with what you have, not what you can get or not what you still need. Does that ever mean it's perfect? No, we're not shooting for perfect. But so much of contentment is a view, is a perspective, is a practice of understanding that the material things, I keep saying it because it's worth repeating, are fleeting. Now, that's not to say I don't love driving the car that I love driving. That's not to say I don't love getting a massage and going out for a great meal. And that's not to say I don't look forward to vacation and travel. However, if I'm doing those things to fill a void inside of me that I don't know how to fulfill within myself, then those things won't have the same meaning. You could be sitting at the most amazing restaurant, but if you are disconnected from the person across from you without knowing what to say or feeling unseen or unheard when you speak, that meal might not give you much happiness. If you take that vacation and you aren't able to be present because you're ruminating on all the things you weren't able to do, or you're anticipating how much laundry you're going to have to do when you get home, you've taken yourself out of the present moment. How much are you able to enjoy that? So presence, awareness, acceptance, these are all the things we want to be able to practice. When we do so, it makes those experiences that we already enjoy and already want more of that much more fulfilling. Because there is a difference between happiness and fulfillment. But just like I said, how I feel content in my life, it's because I'm not striving anymore. I've made the changes that I've needed to make in my life, mostly internally, of where I felt out of alignment, disconnected from myself. Not in alignment, mind, body, and spirit. I used to be stuck in that place all the time. My head felt one thing, my heart felt another, and there was not consistency between what I felt and what I thought. And in absence of knowing what to do about that, I believed the thoughts. I thought that was real. I believed what was rational. I didn't tune into how my body felt in reaction to something that I thought should bring me happiness. If it was rational, if it was logical, I gave that more power than what my body was actually telling me. And that got me in a lot of situations in which I didn't always feel so great, even though I had what I wanted. It was this weird paradox that I was in. And the more I've talked about this with clients, I'm not the only one who's been there. So hopefully this is resonating with you as well. But I want to remind you, we're here listening to this podcast, I'm talking it, you're listening. You're here listening to this podcast. Maybe you're in my podcast community because you're wanting something to change. You're needing to heal. You're needing to grow. You're seeking transformation. You're wanting to let go of what no longer is serving you. And it's so easy to externalize that. But until we begin to get still and get present and understand ourselves, none of us can make the change until we start that internally. That's why ever since I relaunched the podcast, I've come back to the foundations, the unalome, that spiral that we get stuck in, that hamster wheel, until we recognize there's a way out of that. The way the unalome overlaps and mirrors that cycle of reactivity in which we have a trigger and we have an instant reaction, thoughts, emotions, sensations that we just keep getting ourselves stuck deeper and deeper into that hole until we have the awareness, oh my God, I can work myself out of that. I have the power to do that. And even if nothing around me changes, if I get out of my own cycle of reactivity, I feel better. If I learn how to respond versus react to whatever is arising, I can find happiness and contentment and fulfillment within me, even if the external factors don't change. Now, that's not to say I'm suggesting stay in an abusive relationship and change your inner relationship to it. That, obviously, we need to change what needs to keep us safe. But I'm talking of the more existential things in which we are giving our power away by giving the power to others to make us happy, to give us what we need. But until we are giving it to ourselves, we're not going to be able to receive it from somebody else. I often say one of my joyisms is you can't receive what you don't believe. So if you're seeking validation from your partner, let's say, if you want to be seen, heard, and validated, and they say all the right words to you, if you have not practiced validating yourself, I can guarantee with almost certainty, you're not going to be able to take in the words of somebody else if you can't take it in yourself. If someone gives you a compliment and they really, really mean it, and you slough it off because your inner critic says they're just being nice, because that's not true. Look at how we need to have that inside job happen first. So nothing changes until you do. So this question of what makes you happy, I'm going to suggest to momentarily put aside the external factors that you're seeking to bring you greater joy and happiness and begin to tune into your inner world, which means, based on the story I just told you about the Buddha, how do we get still? Which is why last week we talked about the foundation of meditation. How do we get still to begin to even understand ourselves so we can get to know ourselves better, meet ourselves as if for the first time, every time we pause and breathe, to say, where am I at right now? What am I thinking right now? What am I feeling right now? What am I experiencing right now? To learn how to sit with that, even and especially when it's uncomfortable, and to learn the tools to build the muscle to manage that without getting so overwhelmed, so frustrated that we get disconnected, disrailed. I don't know if disrailed is a word, but you know what I'm saying, where we just begin to spiral. Derailed, that was the word I was thinking of, not disrailed. So in understanding that this is what we're seeking to practice. Now, here's a tricky thing, is being present is not always possible to do every moment of every day, but it's an intention. And for me, as I teach this and as I practice this, it's an attention of my mind. Where is my mind's attention resting? Because if I'm sitting with my partner who I love very much in a beautiful setting, but my mind has wandered to some argument I had with a family member, or if I'm sitting in this beautiful moment and my mind is anticipating how it's going to end and how I'm going to have to go home from this great vacation, and it takes me out of that present moment, then that's going to impact my ability to enjoy where I'm at and what I'm doing. So even as you think back to those questions I asked in the beginning of what brings you happiness, are you even able to notice it, harness it, breathe it in, take it in, sit with it? This is much easier said than done. And this matters because until we recognize how our habits are impacting our own experience, we might continue to externalize our happiness and joy onto others' behaviors. But that's assuming that they even know why they're doing what they're doing. But here's the thing, when we start to do that inside work, when we start to get that greater idea of who we are, what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we're needing, paying attention to how we get distracted or overwhelmed or angry or anxious, whatever it is, we begin to understand that any of those emotions, they're just fleeting. And the more we can sit with and accept them versus react to them and dismiss them or judge them or deny them or resist them, the more greater flexibility we have to ride the waves of our life. So much easier said than done. This is why it's a practice. So how do we begin? Well, for me, and as the foundation of a mindfulness practice, I'm going to come back to it's all about meditation and slowing down. So when I first started meditation practice, I was a busy mom, 2 young kids. I was going back to get my hours to become a therapist. I had a side business. My husband at the time worked very long hours. I was kind of doing it all on my own. And I didn't really know who I was or what I felt. I was so busy from the whole day. I just went through those motions. And if you listened to last week's episode, I was taught that I had to meditate for 20 to 40 minutes a day to begin a practice. And I just called bullshit on that because I didn't have 20 to 40 minutes a day to practice. And if I did, it wasn't going to be spent sitting, breathing on a cushion. So I knew the only way that I could be effective in beginning a practice of greater self-awareness and slowing down and connecting with my breath wasn't actually in stopping and sitting down and breathing. So I met myself where I was at, and I started to meditate while I was driving. Now, again, if you have that image of meditation of sitting cross-legged on a cushion and your hands in a mudra resting on your knees and your eyes closed, that's not what I was doing when I was driving. But what I did do when I was driving was I was intentional. I practiced being present in this moment, and I practiced awareness. So what did that mean? It meant I turned off the radio, I put down the phone, and I consciously breathed when I was on my commute to my internship. Sometimes it was 15 minutes. Sometimes if there was traffic, it could be 40 minutes. But I noticed my breath. I was consciously breathing in, consciously exhaling out. I paid attention to the colors of the cars around me, the flowers blooming on the hillside, the color of the sky, if there were clouds. I started tuning in, really paying attention, which I don't know about you, but I was used to being in a habit of just driving where I had to go and being on autopilot and getting there and actually saying, I don't remember having gotten here. And if we're doing that on our commute, we're probably doing that in our relationships, and we're probably doing that on our vacations. You just aren't present. You're going through the motions. You're waiting for what's next. You're missing what is. And then you think, man, I just took that great trip, but I came home and I don't feel any more enriched from it because I wasn't present during the whole thing. And the happiness might have only been fleeting because I was somewhere else, but then I came back home and I had to come back to my life. And how do I get happy here without having to wait to go back there? But was I really happy there if I wasn't present? Do I know how to be present? So I think you hear what I'm saying. So my meditation in the car was breathing with awareness, being in the present moment. If I was stuck in traffic, to not get mad at it. I didn't create the traffic. I couldn't fix it. I couldn't solve it. Getting mad at it didn't make it go away, only made my reaction to it worse. So I breathed. And the most amazing thing happened. I noticed that when I got to where I was going, I felt calmer. And I wasn't so worried about all the things that were coming next. I was able to do the one thing that I was in front of at that moment. And when I was able to do that there, I was able to harness that into my little side business. When I was able to do that in the side business, I was able to harness that into my kids. And slowly, I noticed, wow, I actually felt a lot better when I wasn't multitasking, which is actually it's a belief we have that we can do. There's no such thing as multitasking. Our brain can actually focus on only one thing at a time, despite how great you think you are at it. If you're multitasking at many things, then you're doing a lot of half-assed things. You're not really giving your time and attention and energy to just one thing. That's where I started. And that driving practice of awareness and breathing and presence inspired me to want to carve out 5 extra minutes in my morning to sit down. I actually had bought a meditation cushion at the time and breathe and connect with my breath. And I started for maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes. Because again, I told you I thought I was going to die after the first 10 minutes, so I was not going to start that again. But I started really, really small. And it felt good. And the more I felt good, the more I wanted to do that. And the more I wanted to do that, the more I created the space for it. You have time to meditate. You're just not choosing to spend your time there. But when you start to do something that you notice feels really good, you want to actually find more time to do that, because all the amazing things that I knew were possible started to actually happen. My mind didn't race as much because I learned I had power over that. We'll talk more about that in another episode. But I wanted to give you that insight to understanding that you can begin a meditation practice at any time, anywhere. All it takes is awareness and conscious connection to your breath and an understanding of having the intention to be present. It's going to start by being the key to your lasting happiness. And if you're wanting to journey forward in any area of your life, the best way to journey forward is to meet yourself where you're at and to understand that you and you alone have the power to create your inner contentment, your inner joy, your inner peace. Because when you have that inner practice, you're not as rattled by the things that go on around you. And all those great experiences I described in the beginning of this episode are going to be heightened. They're going to be that much more enriching, that much more beautiful when you're present and connected to yourself. And you're not giving your power away to other people, places, or things to bring you happiness and joy. It's possible. So if this episode resonated with you, if you are on a search, if you're in a stage in your life where you are seeking more of how to create that inner peace and joy so you can find contentment and fulfillment within yourself so that you can be more content and fulfilled in your relationships and the rest of your life, then you're in the right spot. If you want to delve in deeper to these practices and these tools, I invite you again to join the Journey Forward community. You can check out the link in the show notes that will give you all the information about the membership and how you can get access to more meditations and how you can get the handouts associated with each of these episodes and even be able to join our live training at the end of each month where we come together in community and engage in conversations deeper about all these topics so that this episode is not just a one and done for you, that you can actually integrate and harness this awareness and begin to build that muscle towards living the life you want to be living. I know it's possible, and I'm here to help be a guide and a friend as you walk this on your journey. And if this resonated, I invite you to please give a rating, a review, share it so that others can be on their path to journey forward as well. Thank you so much for tuning in today.